Welcome to Timeless Terrors Volume 7, a collection of classic tales where reason falters and the unseen presses close. In these pages, obsession sharpens into madness, grief wears a mask, and strange realms linger beyond comprehension. From Guy de Maupassant, the Horla charts a descent into paranoia and possession, where an invisible presence slowly takes control. Edgar Allan Poe's The Oblong Box carries you across dark waters where secrecy, loss, and horror travel together toward an unthinkable revelation. And from Ambrose Bierce, an inhabitant of Carcosa, a haunting meditation on death and memory, where the boundary between the living and the dead dissolves into eerie stillness. Narrated by Amazon best-selling horror author Jonathan Dunne. Before we begin, a brief personal note. I'll be stepping back slightly from this channel to concentrate on my next horror novel, Mummy, a story about a strange young man who lives in a mortuary and takes embalming one step too far. I'll continue uploading public domain stories and my own horror works, but at a slower pace, returning to 2 or 3 uploads a week rather than 5 or 6. Your support means more than I can say. So sit back, dim the lights, and listen to Timeless Terrors, Volume 7. An Inhabitant of Carcosa, written by Ambrose Bierce, narrated for you by Jonathan Dunne. Original year of publication, 1886. This work is in the public domain. Production and narration copyright, 2025, Jonathan Dunne. From there be divers sorts of death, some wherein the body remaineth, and in some it vanisheth, quite away with the spirit. The commonly occurreth only in solitude, such is God's will. And none, seeing the end, we say the man is lost, or gone on a long journey, which indeed he hath. But sometimes it hath happened in sight of many, as abundant testimony showeth. In one kind of death the spirit also dieth, and this it hath been known to do while yet the body was in vigour for many years. Sometime, as is veritably attested, it dieth with the body, but after a season is raised up again in that place where the body did decay. Pondering these words of Halley, whom God rest, and questioning their full meaning, as one who, having an intimation, yet doubts if there be not something behind other than that which he has discerned, I noted not whither I had strayed until a sudden chill wind, striking my face, revived in me a sense of my surroundings. I observed with astonishment that everything seemed unfamiliar. On every side of me stretched a bleak and desolate expanse of plain, covered with a tall overgrowth of sere grass, which rustled and whistled in the autumn wind, with heaven knows what mysterious and disquieting suggestion. Protruded at long intervals above it stood strangely shaped and sombre-coloured rocks, which seemed to have an understanding with one another, and to exchange looks of uncomfortable significance, as if they had reared their heads to watch the issue of some foreseen event. A few blasted trees here and there appeared as leaders in this malevolent conspiracy of silent expectation. The day, I thought, must be far advanced, though the sun was invisible, and although sensible that the air was raw and chill, my consciousness of that fact was rather mental than physical. I had no feeling of discomfort. Over all, the dismal landscape, a canopy of low, lead-coloured clouds hung like a visible curse. In all this there were a menace and a portent, a hint of evil and an imitation of doom, Bird, beast, or insect there was none. The wind sighed in the bare branches of the dead trees, and the grey grass bent to whisper in dread secret to the earth. But no other sound nor motion broke the awful repose of that dismal place. I observed in the herbage a number of weather-worn stones, evidently shaped with tools. They were broken, covered with moss and half sunken in the earth. Some lay prostrate, some leaned at various angles, none was vertical. They were obviously headstones of graves, though the graves themselves no longer existed as either mounds or depressions. The years had levelled all. Scattered here and there, more massive blocks showed where some pompous tomb or ambitious monument had once flung its feeble defiance at oblivion. So old seemed these relics, these vestiges of vanity and memorials of affection and piety, so battered and worn and stained, so neglected, deserted, forgotten the place, that I could not help thinking myself the discoverer of the burial ground of a prehistoric race of men whose very name was long extinct. Filled with these reflections, I was for some time heedless of the sequence of my own experiences, but soon I thought, how came I hither? A moment's reflection seemed to make this all clear and explain at the same time, though in a disquieting way, the singular character with which my fancy had invested all that I saw or heard. I was ill. I remembered now that I had been prostrated by a sudden fever, and that my family had told me that in my periods of delirium I had constantly cried out for liberty and air, and had been held in bed to prevent my escape out of doors. Now I eluded the vigilance of my attendants, and had wandered hither to where I could not conjecture. Clearly, I was at a considerable distance from the city where I dwelt, the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. No signs of human life were anywhere visible nor audible. No rising smoke, no watchdog's bark, no lowing of cattle, no shouts of children at play. Nothing but that dismal burial place with its air of mystery and dread, due to my own disordered brain. Was I not becoming again delirious? There beyond human aid? Was it not indeed all an illusion of my madness? I called aloud the names of my wives and sons, reached out my hands in search of theirs, even as I walked among the crumbling stones, and a noise behind me caused me to turn about. A wild animal, a lynx, was approaching. The thought came to me, if I break down here in the desert, if the fever return and I fail, this beast will be at my throat. I sprang toward it, shouting. It trotted tranquilly by, within a hand's breadth of me, and disappeared behind a rock. A moment later a man's head appeared to rise out of the ground, a short distance away. He was ascending the farther slope of a low hill whose crest was hardly to be distinguished from the general level. His whole figure soon came into view against the background of grey cloud. He was half naked, half clad in skins. His hair was unkempt, his beard long and ragged. In one hand he carried a bow and arrow. The other held a blazing torch with a long trail of black smoke. He walked slowly and with caution, as if he feared falling into some open grave concealed by the tall grass. This strange apparition surprised but did not alarm, and taking such a course as to intercept him, I met him almost face to face, accosting him with the familiar salutation. "God keep you." He gave no heed, nor did he arrest his pace. "Good stranger," I continued, "I am ill and lost. Direct me, I beseech you, to Carcosa." The man broke into a barbarous chant in an unknown tongue, passing on and away. An owl on the branch of a decayed tree hooted dismally, and was answered by another in the distance. Looking upward, I saw, through a sudden rift in the clouds, Aldebaran and the Hyades. In all this there was a hint of night, the lynx, the man with the torch, the owl. Yet I saw even the stars in absence of the darkness. I saw, but was apparently not seen, nor heard. Under what awful spell did I exist? I seated myself at the root of a great tree, seriously to consider what it were best to do. That I was mad I could no longer doubt, yet recognized a ground of doubt in the conviction. Of fever I had no trace. I had withal a sense of exhilaration and vigour altogether unknown to me, a feeling of mental and physical exaltation. My senses seemed all alert. I could feel the air as a ponderous substance. I could hear the silence. A great root of the giant tree against whose trunk I leaned as I sat held and enclosed in its grasp a slab of stone, a part of which protruded into a recess formed by another root. The stone was thus partly protected from the weather, though greatly decomposed. Its edges were worn round, its corners eaten away, its surface deeply furrowed and scaled. Glittering particles of mica were visible in the earth about it, vestiges of its decomposition. This stone had apparently marked the grave out of which the tree had sprung ages ago. The tree's exacting roots had robbed the grave and made the stone a prisoner. A sudden wind pushed some dry leaves and twigs from the uppermost face of the stone. I saw the low relief letters of an inscription and bent to read it. God in heaven, my name, in full, the date of my birth, the date of my death. A level shaft of light illuminated to the whole side of the tree as I sprang to my feet in terror. The sun was rising in the rosy east. I stood between the tree and his broad red disk. No shadow darkened the trunk. A chorus of howling wolves saluted the dawn. I saw them sitting on their haunches, singly and in groups, on the summits of irregular mounds and tumuli, filling half of my desert prospect and extending to the horizon. And then I knew that these were the ruins of the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. Such are the facts imparted to the medium, Beiroles, by the spirit Hoseib Alar Robardin. The Horla, written by Guy de Maupassant, narrated for you by Jonathan Dunne. Original year of publication, 1887. This work is in the public domain. Production and narration copyright, 2025. Jonathan Dunne. May 8th. What a lovely day. I have spent all the morning lying on the grass in front of my house, under the enormous plantain tree which covers and shades and shelters the whole of it. I like this part of the country. I am fond of living here, because I am attached to it by deep roots, the profound and delicate roots which attach a man to the soil on which his ancestors were born and died, to their traditions, their usages, their food, the local expressions, the peculiar language of the peasants, the smell of the soil, the hamlets, and to the atmosphere itself. I love the house in which I grew up. From my windows I can see the Seine, which flows by the side of my garden, on the other side of the road. Almost through my grounds, the great and wide Seine, which goes to Rouen and Havre, and which is covered with boats passing to and fro. On the left, down yonder, lies Rouen, populous Rouen, with its blue roofs massing under pointed Gothic towers. Innumerable are they, delicate or broad, dominated by the spire of the cathedral, full of bells which sound through the blue air on fine mornings, sending their sweet and distant iron clang to me, their metallic sounds, now stronger and now weaker, according as the wind is strong or light. What a delicious morning it was! About 11 o'clock, a long line of boats drawn by a steam tug, as big a fly, and which scarcely puffed while emitting its thick smoke, passed my gate. After 2 schooners, whose red flags fluttered toward the sky, there came a magnificent Brazilian 3-master. It was perfectly white and wonderfully clean and shining. I saluted it. I hardly know why, except that the sight of the vessel gave me great pleasure. May 12th. I have had a slight feverish attack for the last few days, and I feel ill, or rather, I feel low-spirited. Whence come those mysterious influences which change our happiness into discouragement, and our self-confidence into diffidence? One might almost say that the air, the invisible air, is full of unknowable forces, whose mysterious presence we have to endure. I wake up in the best of spirits, with an inclination to sing in my heart. Why? I go down by the side of the river, and suddenly, after walking a short distance, I return home wretched, as if some misfortune were awaiting me there. Why? Is it a cold shiver which, passing over my skin, has upset my nerves and given me a fit of low spirits? In the form of the clouds, or the tints of the sky, or the colours of the surrounding objects which are so changeable, which have troubled my thoughts as they passed before my eyes? Who can tell? Everything that surrounds us, everything that we see without looking at it, everything that we touch without knowing it, everything that we handle without feeling it, everything that we meet without clearly distinguishing it, has a rapid, surprising, and inexplicable effect upon us, and upon our organs, and through them on our ideas, and on our being itself. How profound that mystery of the invisible is! We cannot fathom it with our miserable senses. Our eyes are unable to perceive what is either too small or too great, too near to or too far from us. We can see neither the inhabitants of a star nor of a drop of water. Our ears deceive us, for they transmit to us the vibrations of the air in sonorous notes. Our senses are fairies who work the miracle of changing that movement into noise, and by that metamorphosis give birth to music, which makes the mute agitation of nature a harmony. So with our sense of smell, which is weaker than that of a dog, and so with our sense of taste, which can scarcely distinguish the age of a wine. Oh, if we only had other organs which could work other miracles in our favour, what a number of fresh things we might discover around us. May 16th. I am ill, decidedly. I was so well last month. I am feverish, horribly feverish. Or rather, I am in a state of feverish enervation, which makes my mind suffer as much as my body. I have without ceasing the horrible sensation of some danger threatening me, the apprehension of some coming misfortune or of approaching death, a presentiment, which is no doubt an attack of some illness still unnamed, which germinates in the flesh and in the blood. May 18th. I have just come from consulting my medical man, for I can no longer get any sleep. He found that my pulse was high, my eyes dilated, my nerves highly strung, but no alarming symptoms. I must have a course of shower baths, and of bromide of potassium. May 25th. No change. My state is really very peculiar. As the evening comes on, an incomprehensible feeling of disquietude seizes me, just as if night conceals some terrible menace toward me. I dine quickly, and then try to read, but I do not understand the words, and can scarcely distinguish the letters. Then I walk up and down my drawing room, oppressed by a feeling of confused and irresistible fear, a fear of sleep and a fear of my bed. About 10 o'clock I go up to my room. As soon as I have entered, I lock and bolt the door. I am frightened. Of what? Up till the present time I have been frightened of nothing. I open my cupboards and look under my bed. I listen. To what? How strange it is that a simple feeling of discomfort, of impeded or heightened circulation, perhaps the irritation of a nervous centre, a slight congestion, a slight disturbance in the imperfect and delicate functions of our living machinery, can turn the most light-hearted of men into a melancholy one, and make a coward of the bravest. Then I go to bed, and I wait for sleep, as a man might wait for the executioner. I wait for its coming with dread, and my heart beats and my legs tremble, while my whole body shivers beneath the warmth of the bedclothes until the moment when I suddenly fall asleep. As a man throws himself into a pool of stagnant water in order to drown, I do not feel this perfidious sleep coming over me as I used to, but a sleep which is close to me and watching me, which is going to seize me by the hand, to close my eyes and annihilate me. I sleep a long time, 2 or 3 hours perhaps. Then a dream, no, a nightmare, lays hold on me. I feel that I am in bed and asleep. I feel it and I know it, and I feel also that somebody is coming close to me, is looking at me, touching me, is getting onto my bed, is kneeling on my chest, is taking my neck between his hands and squeezing it with all his might in order to strangle me. I struggle, bound by that terrible powerlessness which paralyzes us in our dreams. I try to cry out, but I cannot. I want to move, but I cannot. I try with the most violent efforts and out of breath to turn over and throw off this being which is crushing and suffocating me. I cannot. And then suddenly I wake up, shaken and bathed in perspiration. I light a candle and find that I am alone. And after that crisis which occurs every night, I at length fall asleep and slumber tranquilly till morning. June 2nd. My state has grown worse. What is the matter with me? The bromide does me no good, and the shower baths have no effect whatever. Sometimes, in order to tire myself out, though I am fatigued enough already, I go for a walk in the forest of Rumel. I used to think at first that the fresh light and soft air, impregnated with the odour of herbs and leaves, would instill new life into my veins and impart fresh energy to my heart. One day I turned into a broad ride in the wood, and then I diverged toward La Bouille through a narrow path, between 2 rows of exceedingly tall trees, which placed a thick, green, almost black roof between the sky and me. A sudden shiver ran through me, not a cold shiver, but a shiver of agony, and so I hastened my steps, uneasy at being alone in the wood, frightened stupidly and without reason at the profound solitude. Suddenly, it seemed as if I were being followed, that somebody was walking at my heels, close, quite close to me, near enough to touch me. I turned round suddenly, but I was alone. I saw nothing behind me except a straight, broad ride, empty and bordered by high trees, horribly empty. On the other side also it extended until it was lost in the distance, and looked just the same, terrible. I closed my eyes. Why? And then I began to turn round on one heel very quickly, just like a top. I nearly fell down and opened my eyes. The trees were dancing around me and the earth heaved. I was obliged to sit down. Then, I no longer remembered how I had come. What a strange idea! What a strange idea! I did not the least know. I started off to the right, and got back into the avenue which had led me into the middle of the forest. June 3rd. I have had a terrible night. I shall go away for a few weeks, for no doubt a journey will set me up again. July 2nd. I have come back, quite cured, and have had a most delightful trip into the bargain. I have been to Mont Saint-Michel, which I had not seen before. What a sight, when one arrives as I did, at Avranches, toward the end of the day. The town stands on a hill, and I was taken into the public garden at the extremity of the town. I uttered a cry of astonishment. An extraordinarily large bay lay extended before me, as far as my eyes could reach, between two hills which were lost to sight in the mist. And in the middle of this immense yellow bay, under a clear golden sky, a peculiar hill rose up, sombre and pointed in the midst of the sand. The sun had just disappeared, and under the still flaming sky stood out the outline of that fantastic rock which bears on its summit a picturesque monument. At daybreak I went into it. The tide was low, as it had been the night before, and I saw that wonderful abbey rise up before me as I approached it. After several hours' walking, I reached the enormous mass of rock which supports the little town, dominated by the great church. Having climbed the steep and narrow street, I entered the most wonderful Gothic building that has ever been erected to God on earth, large as a town and full of low rooms which seem buried beneath vaulted roofs, and of lofty galleries supported by delicate columns. I entered this gigantic granite jewel, which is as light in its effect as a bit of lace, and is covered with towers, with slender belfries to which spiral staircases ascend. The flying buttresses raise strange heads that bristle with chimeras, with devils, with fantastic animals, with monstrous flowers, are joined together by finely carved arches, to the blue sky by day, and to the black sky by night. When I had reached the summit, I said to the monk who accompanied me, "Father, how happy you must be here!" And he replied, "It is very windy, monsieur." And so we began to talk while watching the rising tide, which ran over the sand and covered it with a steel cuirass. And then the monk told me stories, all the old stories belonging to the place, legends, nothing but legends. One of them struck me forcibly. The country people, whose belonging to the Mornay, declared that at night one can hear talking going on in the sand, and also that two goats bleat, one with a strong, the other with a weak voice. Incredulous people declare that it is nothing but the screaming of the seabirds, which occasionally resembles bleatings, and occasionally human lamentations. But belated fishermen swear that they have met an old shepherd, whose cloak-covered head they can never see, wandering on the sand, between two tides, round the little town placed so far out of the world. They declare he is guiding and walking before a he-goat, with a man's face, and a she-goat with a woman's face, both with white hair, who talk incessantly, quarrelling in a strange language, and then suddenly cease talking in order to bleat with all their might. "Do you believe it?" I asked the monk. "I scarcely know," he replied. And I continued, "If there are other beings besides ourselves on this earth, how comes it that we have not known it for so long a time? Or how is it that I have not seen them?" He replied, "Do we see the 100,000th part of what exists? Look here. There is the wind, which is the strongest force in nature. It knocks down men and blows down buildings, uproots trees, raises the sea into mountains of water, destroys cliffs, and casts great ships onto the breakers. It kills, it whistles, it sighs, it roars. But have you ever seen it? And can you see it? Yet it exists for all that. I was silent before this simple reasoning. That man was a philosopher, or perhaps a fool. I could not say which exactly, so I held my tongue. What he had said had often been in my own thoughts. July 3rd. I have slept badly. Certainly there is some feverish influence here, for my coachman is suffering in the same way as I am. When I went back home yesterday, I noticed his singular paleness, and I asked him, "What is the matter with you, Jean?" "The matter is that I never get any rest, and my nights devour my days. Since your departure, monsieur, there has been a spell over me." However, the other servants are all well, but I am very frightened of having another attack myself. July 4th. I'm decidedly taken again, for my old nightmares have returned. Last night I felt somebody leaning on me who was sucking my life from between my lips with his mouth. Yet he was sucking it out of my neck like a leech would have done. Then he got up, satiated, and I woke up so beaten, crushed, and annihilated that I could not move. If this continues for a few days, I shall certainly go away again. July 5th. Have I lost my reason? What has happened? What I saw last night is so strange that my head wanders when I think of it. As I do now every evening, I had locked my door. Then, being thirsty, I drank half a glass of water, and I accidentally noticed that the water bottle was full up to the cut-glass stopper. Then I went to bed and fell into one of my terrible sleeps, from which I was aroused in about 2 hours by a still more terrible shock. Picture to yourself a sleeping man who is being murdered, who wakes up with a knife in his chest, a gargling in his throat, is covered with blood, can no longer breathe, is going to die, and does not understand anything at all about it. There you have it. Having recovered my senses, I was thirsty again, so I lighted my candle and went to the table on which my water bottle was. I lifted it up and tilted it over my glass, but nothing came out. It was empty. It was completely empty. At first I could not understand it at all. Then suddenly I was seized by such a terrible feeling that I had to sit down, or rather fall into a chair. Then I sprang up with a bound to look about me. Then I sat down again, overcome by astonishment and fear, in front of the transparent crystal bottle. I looked at it with fixed eyes, trying to solve the puzzle, and my hands trembled. Somebody had drunk the water, but who? I, without any doubt. It could surely only be I. In that case I was a somnambulist, was living, without knowing it, that double mysterious life which makes us doubt whether there are not two beings in us, whether a strange, unknowable, and invisible being does not, during our moments of mental and physical torpor, animate the inert body, forcing it to a more willing obedience than it yields to ourselves. Oh, who will understand my horrible agony? Who will understand the emotion of a man sound in mind, wide awake, full of sense, who looks in horror at the disappearance of a little water while he was asleep, through the glass of a water bottle, and remained sitting until it was daylight, without venturing to go to bed again? July 6th. I am going mad. Again. All the contents of my water bottle have been drunk during the night, or rather, I have drunk it. But is it I? Is it I? Who could it be? Who? Oh, God, am I going mad? Who will save me? July 10th. I have just been through some surprising ordeals. Undoubtedly I must be mad, and yet... On July 6th, before going to bed, I put some wine, milk, water, bread, and strawberries on my table. Somebody drank. I drank. all the water and a little of the milk, but neither of the wine nor the bread nor the strawberries were touched. On the 7th of July, I renewed the same experiment, with the same results, and on July 8th I left out the water and the milk, and nothing was touched. Lastly, on July 9th, I put only water and milk on my table, taking care to wrap up the bottles in white muslin, and to tie down the stoppers. Then I rubbed my lips, my beard, and my hands with pencil lead, and went to bed. Deep slumber seized me, soon followed by a terrible awakening. I had not moved, and my sheets were not marked. I rushed to the table. The muslin round the bottles remained intact. I undid the string, tumbling with fear. All the water had been drunk, and so had the milk. Ah, great God! I must start for Paris immediately. July 12th. Paris. I must have lost my head during the last few days. I must be the plaything of my enervated imagination, unless I am really a somnambulist. Or I have been brought under the power of one of those influences, hypnotic suggestion, for example, which are known to exist, but have hitherto been inexplicable. In any case, my mental state bordered on madness, and 24 hours of Paris sufficed to restore me to my equilibrium. Yesterday, after doing some business and paying some visits, which instilled fresh and invigorating mental air into me, I wound up my evening at the Théâtre Français, a drama by Alexandre Dumas. The younger was being acted, and his brilliant and powerful play completed my cure. Certainly, solitude is dangerous for active minds. We need men who can think and can talk around us. When we are alone for a long time, we people space with phantoms. I returned along the boulevards to my hotel in excellent spirits. Amid the jostling of the crowd, I thought, not without irony, of my terrors and surmises of the previous week, because I believed, yes, I believed, that an invisible being lived beneath my roof. How weak our mind is, how quickly it is terrified and unbalanced as soon as we are confronted with a small, incomprehensible fact. Instead of dismissing the problem with, "We do not understand because we cannot find the cause," we immediately imagine terrible mysteries and supernatural powers. July 14th. Fête of the Republic. I walked through the streets, and the crackers and flags amuse me like a child. Still, it is very foolish to make merry on a set date by government decree. People are like a flock of sheep, now steadily patient, now in ferocious revolt. Say to it, "Amuse yourself," and it amuses itself. Say to it, "Go and fight with your neighbor," and it goes and fights. Say to it, "Vote for the emperor," and it votes for the emperor. Then say to it, "Vote for the republic," and it votes for the republic. Those who direct it are stupid too, but instead of obeying men, they obey principles, a course which can only be foolish, ineffective, and false, for the very reason that principles are ideas which are considered as certain and unchangeable, whereas in this world one is certain of nothing, since light is an illusion and noise is deception. July 16th. I saw some things yesterday that troubled me very much. I was dining at my cousin's, Madame Sable, whose husband is colonel of the 76th Chasseurs at Limoges. There were 2 young women there, one of whom had married a medical man, Dr. Parent, who devotes himself a great deal to nervous diseases and to the extraordinary manifestations which just now experiments in hypnotism and suggestion are producing. He related to us at some length the enormous results obtained by English scientists and the doctors of the medical school at Nancy, and the facts which he adduced appeared to me so strange that I declared that I was altogether incredulous. "We are," he declared, "on the point of discovering one of the most important secrets of nature. I mean to say, one of its most important secrets on this earth. For assuredly there are some up in the stars yonder of a different kind of importance. Ever since man has thought, since he has been able to express and write down his thoughts, he has felt himself close to a mystery which is impenetrable to his coarse and imperfect senses, and he endeavours to supplement the feeble penetrations of his organs by the efforts of his intellect. As long as that intellect remained in its elementary stage, the intercourse with invisible spirits assumed forms which were commonplace, though terrifying. These sprang the popular belief in the supernatural, the legends of wandering spirits, of fairies, of gnomes, of ghosts. I might even say the conception of God, for our ideas of the workman-creator, from whatever religion they may have come down to us, are certainly the most mediocre, the stupidest, and the most unacceptable inventions that ever sprang from the frightened brain of any human creature. Nothing is truer than what Voltaire says. If God made man in his own image, man has certainly paid him back again. But for rather more than a century, men seem to have had a presentiment of something new. Mesmer and some others have put us on an unexpected track, and within the last 2 or 3 years especially, we have arrived at results really surprising. My cousin, who is very incredulous, smiled, and Dr. Parent said to her, "Would you like me to try and send you to sleep, madame?" "Yes, certainly." She sat down in an easy chair, and he began to look at her fixedly, as if to fascinate her. I suddenly felt myself somewhat discomposed. My heart beat rapidly, and I had a choking feeling in my throat. I saw that Madame Sableu's eyes were growing heavy. Her mouth twitched, and her bosom heaved, and at the end of 10 minutes she was asleep. "Go behind her," the doctor said to me. So I took a seat behind her. He put a visiting card into her hands and said to her, "This is a looking-glass. What do you see in it?" She replied, "I see my cousin." "What is he doing?" "He is twisting his moustache." "And now?" "He is taking a photograph out of his pocket." "Whose photograph is it?" "His own." That was true, for the photograph had been given me that same evening at the hotel. "What is his attitude in this portrait?" "He is standing up with his hat in his hand." She saw these things in that card, in that piece of white pasteboard, as if she had seen them in a looking-glass. The young women were frightened and exclaimed, "That is quite enough, quite enough." But the doctor said to her authoritatively, "You will get up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Then you will go and call on your cousin at his hotel and ask him to lend you the 5,000 francs which your husband asks of you, and which he will ask for when he sets out on his coming journey." Then he woke her up. On returning to my hotel, I thought over this curious séance, and I was assailed by doubts, not as to my cousin's absolute and undoubted good faith, for I had known her as well as if she had been my own sister, ever since she was a child, but as to a possible trick on the doctor's part. Had not he, perhaps, kept a glass hidden in his hand, which he showed to the young woman in her sleep, at the same time as he did the card? Professional conjurers do things which are just as singular. However, I went to bed, and this morning at about 8:30 I was wakened by my footman, who said to me, "Madame Sablé is asked to see you immediately, monsieur." I dressed hastily and went to her. She sat down in some agitation, with her eyes on the floor, and, without raising her veil, said to me, "I am going to ask a great favour of you." "What is it, cousin?" "I do not like to tell you, and yet I must. I am in absolute want of 5,000 francs. What? You? Yes, or rather my husband, who has asked me to procure them for him. I was so stupefied that I hesitated to answer. I asked myself whether she had not really been making fun of me with Dr. Parent, if it were not merely a very well-acted farce, which had been got up beforehand. On looking at her attentively, however, my doubts disappeared. She was trembling with grief, so painful was this step to her, and I was sure that her throat was full of sobs. I knew that she was very rich, so I continued. What? Has not your husband 5,000 francs at his disposal? Come, think. Are you sure that he commissioned you to ask me for them? She hesitated for a few seconds, as if she were making a great effort to search her memory, and then she replied, Yes, I am quite sure of it. He has written to you? She hesitated again and reflected, and I guessed the torture of her thoughts. She did not know. She only knew that she was to borrow 5,000 francs of me for her husband. So she told a lie. Yes, he has written to me. When, pray? You did not mention it to me yesterday. I received his letter this morning. Can you show it to me? No, it contained private matters, things too personal to ourselves. I burnt it. So your husband runs into debt? She hesitated again, and then murmured, I do not know. Thereupon I said bluntly, I have not 5,000 francs at my disposal at this moment, my dear cousin. She uttered a cry as if she were in pain, and said, Oh, I beseech you to get them for me. She got so excited and clasped her hands, as if she were praying to me. I heard her voice change its tone. She wept and sobbed, harassed and dominated by the irresistible order that she had received. Oh, I beg you to. If you knew what I am suffering, I want them today. I had pity on her. You shall have them by and by, I swear to you. Oh, thank you. How kind you are. I continued. Do you remember what took place at your house last night? Yes. Do you remember that Dr. Parent sent you to sleep? Yes. Oh, very well then. He ordered you to come to me this morning to borrow 5,000 francs, and at this moment you are obeying that suggestion. She considered for a few moments, and then replied, But as it is my husband who wants them. For a whole hour I tried to convince her, but could not succeed, and when she had gone I went to the doctor. He was just going out, and he listened to me with a smile and said, Do you believe now? Yes, I cannot help it. Let us go to your cousin's. She was already sitting on a couch, overcome with fatigue. The doctor felt her pulse, looked at her for some time with one hand raised toward her eyes, which she closed by degrees under the irresistible power of this magnetic influence. When she was asleep, he said, Your husband does not require the 5,000 francs any longer. You must therefore forget that you asked your cousin to lend them to you, and if he speaks to you about it, you will not understand him. Then he woke her up, and I took out a pocket-book and said, Here is what you asked me for this morning, my dear cousin. But she was so surprised that I did not venture to persist. Nevertheless, I tried to recall the circumstance to her, but she denied it vigorously, thought that I was making fun of her, and in the end very nearly lost her temper. There, I have just come back, and I have not been able to eat my lunch, for this experiment has altogether upset me. July 19th. Many people to whom I have told the adventure have laughed at me. I no longer know what to think. The wise man says, perhaps. July 21st. I dined at Bougival, and then I spent the evening at a boatmen's ball. Decidedly everything depends on place and surroundings. It would be at the height of folly to believe in the supernatural on the Île de la Grenouille. But on the top of Mont Saint-Michel or in India, we are terribly under the influence of our surroundings. I shall return home next week. July 30th. I came back to my own house yesterday. Everything is going on well. August 2nd. Nothing fresh. It is splendid weather, and I spend my days in watching the Seine flow past. August 4th. Quarrels among my servants. They declare that the glasses are broken in the cupboards at night. The footman accuses the cook. She accuses the needlewoman, and the latter accuses the other two. Who is the culprit? It would take a clever person to tell. August 6th. This time, I am not mad. I have seen. I can doubt no longer. I have seen it. I was walking at 2:00 among my rose trees, in the full sunlight, in the walk bordered by autumn roses which are beginning to fall. As I stopped to look at a Géant de Bataille, which had 3 splendid blooms, I distinctly saw the stalk of one of the roses bend close to me, as if an invisible hand had bent it, and then break, as if that hand had picked it. Then the flower raised itself, following the curve which a hand would have described in carrying it toward a mouth, and remained suspended in the transparent air, alone and motionless, a terrible red spot, 3 yards from my eyes. In desperation, I rushed at it to take it. I found nothing. It had disappeared. Then I was seized with furious rage against myself, for it is not wholesome for a reasonable and serious man to have such hallucinations. But was it a hallucination? I turned to look for the stalk, and I found it immediately under the bush, freshly broken, between the 2 other roses which remained on the branch. I returned home then, with a much disturbed mind, for I am certain now, certain as I am of the alteration of day and night, that there exists close to me an invisible being, who lives on milk and on water, who can touch objects, take them and change their places, who is consequently endowed with a material nature, although imperceptible to sense, and who lives as I do, under my roof. August 7th. I slept tranquilly. He drank the water out of my decanter, but did not disturb my sleep. I asked myself whether I am mad. As I was walking just now in the sun by the riverside, doubts as to my own sanity arose in me. Not vague doubts such as I have had hitherto, but precise and absolute doubts. I have seen mad people, and I have known some who were quite intelligent, lucid, even clear-sighted in every concern of life, except on one point. They could speak clearly, readily, profoundly on everything, till their thoughts were caught in the breakers of their delusions and went to pieces there, were dispersed and swamped in that furious and terrible sea of fogs and squalls which is called madness. I certainly should think that I was mad, absolutely mad, if I were not conscious that I knew my state, if I could not fathom it and analyze it with the most complete lucidity. I should, in fact, be a reasonable man labouring under a hallucination. Some unknown disturbance must have been excited in my brain, one of those disturbances which physiologists of the present day try to note and to fix precisely. And that disturbance must have caused a profound gulf in my mind and in the order and logic of my ideas. Similar phenomena occurred in dreams, and lead us through the most unlikely of phantasmagoria, without causing us any surprise, because our verifying apparatus and our sense of control have gone to sleep, while our imaginative faculty wakes and works. Was it not possible that one of the imperceptible keys of the cerebral fingerboard had been paralyzed in me? Some men lose the recollection of proper names, or of verbs, or of numbers, or merely of dates, in consequence of an accident. The localization of all the avenues of thought has been accomplished nowadays. What, then, would there be surprising in the fact that my faculty of controlling the unreality of certain hallucinations should be destroyed for the time being? I thought of all this as I walked by the side of the water. The sun was shining brightly on the river and made earth delightful, while it filled me with love for life, for the swallows, whose swift agility is always delightful in my eyes, for the plants by the riverside, whose rustling is a pleasure to my ears. By degrees, however, an inexplicable feeling of discomfort seized me. It seemed to me as if some unknown force were numbing and stopping me, were preventing me from going further, and were calling me back. I felt that painful wish to return which comes on you when you have left a beloved invalid at home, and are seized by a presentiment that he is worse. I therefore returned despite of myself, feeling certain that I should find some bad news awaiting me, a letter or a telegram. There was nothing, however, and I was surprised and uneasy, more so than if I had had another fantastic vision. August 8th. I spent a terrible evening yesterday. He does not show himself any more, but I feel that he is near me, watching me, looking at me, penetrating me, dominating me, and more terrible to me when he hides himself thus than if he were to manifest his constant and invisible presence by supernatural phenomena. However, I slept. August 9th. Nothing, but I am afraid. August 10th. Nothing, but what will happen tomorrow? August 11th. Still nothing. I cannot stop at home with this fear hanging over me, and these thoughts in my mind. I shall go away. August 12th. 10 o'clock at night. All day long I have been trying to get away, and have not been able. I contemplated a simple and easy act of liberty, a carriage ride to Rouen, and I have not been able to do it. What is the reason? August 13th. When one is attacked by certain maladies, the springs of our physical being seem broken, our energies destroyed, our muscles relaxed, our bones to be as soft as our flesh, and our blood as liquid as water. I am experiencing the same in my moral being, in a strange and distressing manner. I have no longer any strength, any courage, any self-control, nor even any power to set my own will in motion. I have no power left to will anything, but someone does it for me, and I obey. August 14th. I am lost. Somebody possesses my soul and governs it. Somebody orders all my acts, all my movements, all my thoughts. I am no longer master of myself. Nothing except an enslaved and terrified spectator of the things which I do. I wish to go out. I cannot. He does not wish to. And so I remain, trembling and distracted in the armchair in which he keeps me sitting. I merely wish to get up and to rouse myself, so as to think that I am still master of myself. I cannot. I am riveted to my chair, and my chair adheres to the floor in such a manner that no force of mine can move us. Then suddenly I must go to the foot of my garden to pick some strawberries and eat them. And I go there. I pick the strawberries and I eat them. Oh, my God, is there a God? If there be one, deliver me, save me, succour me. Pardon, pity, mercy, save me. Oh, what sufferings, what torture, what horror. August 15th. Certainly this is the way in which my poor cousin was possessed and swayed. When she came to borrow 5,000 francs of me, she was under the power of a strange will which had entered her, like another soul, a parasitic and ruling soul. Is the world coming to an end? But who is he? This invisible being that rules me, this unknowable being, this rover of a supernatural race. Invisible beings exist, then. How is it, then, that since the beginning of the world they have never manifested themselves in such a manner as they do to me? I have never read anything that resembles what goes on in my house. Oh, if I could only leave it, if I could only go away and flee, and never return, I should be saved. But I cannot. August 16th. I managed to escape today for 2 hours. Like a prisoner who finds the door of his dungeon accidentally open. I suddenly felt that I was free and that he was far away. And so I gave orders to put the horses in as quickly as possible, and I drove to Rouen. Oh, how delightful to be able to say to my coachman, "Go to Rouen." Then, as I was getting into my carriage, I intended to say, "To the railway station." But instead of this I did not speak, but I shouted in such a loud voice that all the passers-by turned round, "Home!" And I fell back onto the cushion of my carriage, overcome by mental agony. He had found me out and regained possession of me. August 17th. Oh, what a night! What a night! And yet it seems to me that I ought to rejoice. I read until 1 o'clock in the morning. Hierostaus, doctor of philosophy and theogony, wrote the history and the manifestation of all those invisible beings which hover around man, or of whom he dreams. He describes their origin, their domains, their power, but none of them resembles the one which haunts me. One might say that man, ever since he has thought, has had a foreboding and a fear of a new being, stronger than himself, his successor in this world, and that, feeling him near, and not being able to foretell the nature of the unseen one, he has, in his terror, created the whole race of hidden beings, vague phantoms, born of fear. Having therefore read until 1 o'clock in the morning, I went and sat down at the open window in order to cool my forehead and my thoughts in the calm night air. It was very pleasant and warm. How I should have enjoyed such a night formerly! There was no moon, but the stars darted out of their rays in the dark heavens. Who inhabits those worlds? What forms, what living beings, what animals are there yonder? Do those who are thinkers in those distant worlds know more than we do? What can they do more than we? What do they see which we do not? Will not one of them, some day or some other, traversing space, appear on our earth to conquer it, just as formerly the Norsemen crossed the sea in order to subjugate nations feebler than themselves? We are so weak, so powerless, so ignorant, so small. We who live on this particle of mud which revolves in liquid air. I fell asleep, dreaming thus in the cool night air, and then, having slept for about 3/4 of an hour, I opened my eyes without moving, awakened by an indescribably confused and strange sensation. At first I saw nothing, and then suddenly it appeared to me as if a page of the book, which had remained open on my table, turned over of its own accord. Not a breath of air come in at my window, and I was surprised and waited. In about 4 minutes I saw, with my own eyes, another page lift itself up and fall down on the others, as if a finger had turned it over. My armchair was empty, appeared empty, but I knew that he was there, he and sitting in my place, and that he was reading. With a furious bound, the bound of an enraged wild beast that wishes to disembowel its tamer, I crossed my room to seize him, to strangle him, to kill him. But before I could reach it, my chair fell over as if somebody had run away from me. My table rocked, my lamp fell and went out, and my window closed, as if some thief had been surprised and had fled out into the night, shutting it behind him. So he had run away. He had been afraid. He afraid of me. So tomorrow or later, some day or other, I should be able to hold him in my clutches and crush him against the ground. Do not dogs occasionally bite and strangle their masters? August 18th. I have been thinking the whole day long. Oh, yes, I will obey him, follow his impulses, fulfill all his wishes, show myself humble, submissive, a coward. He is the stronger, but an hour will come. August 19th. I know all. I have just read the following in the Revue du Monde Scientifique. A curious piece of news comes to us from Rio de Janeiro. Madness, an epidemic of madness which may be compared to that contagious madness which attacked the people of Europe in the Middle Ages, is at this moment raging in the province of San Paulo. The frightened inhabitants are leaving their houses, deserting their villages, abandoning their land, saying that they are pursued, possessed, governed like human cattle by invisible, though tangible beings, by a species of vampire, which feeds on their life while they are asleep, and which, besides, drinks water and milk, without appearing to touch any other nourishment. Professor Don Pedro Enrique, accompanied by several medical savants, has gone to the province of San Paulo in order to study the origin and the manifestations of this surprising madness on the spot, and to propose such measures to the emperor as may appear to him to be most fitted to restore the mad population to reason. I remember now that fine Brazilian three-master which passed in front of my windows as it was going up the Seine on the 8th of last May. I thought it looked so pretty, so white and bright. That being was on board of her, coming from there, where its race sprang from, and it saw me. It saw my house, which was also white, and he sprang from the ship onto the land. Oh, good heavens! Now I know, I can divine. The reign of man is over, and he has come. He whom disquieted priests exorcised, whom sorcerers evoked on dark nights, without seeing him appear. he to whom the imaginations of the transient masters of the world lent all the monstrous or graceful forms of gnomes, spirits, genii, fairies, and familiar spirits. After the coarse conceptions of primitive fear, men more enlightened gave him a truer form. Mesmer divined him, and 10 years ago physicians accurately discovered the nature of his power. Even before he exercised it himself, they played with that weapon of their new lord, the sway of a mysterious will over the human soul, which had become enslaved. They called it mesmerism, hypnotism, suggestion, I know not what. I have seen them diverting themselves like rash children with this horrible power. Woe to us! Woe to man! He has come, what does he call himself? I fancy that it is he shouting out his name to me, and I do not hear him. Yes, he is shouting it out. I am listening. I cannot repeat it. Horla! I have heard the Horla. It is he, the Horla. He has come. Ah! The vulture has eaten the pigeon. The wolf has eaten the lamb. The lion has devoured the sharp-horned buffalo. Man has killed the lion with an arrow, with a spear, with gunpowder. But the Horla will make of man what man has made of the horse and of the ox, his chattel, his slave, and his fool, by the mere power of his will. Woe to us! But nevertheless, sometimes the animal rebels and kills the man. Sometimes the animal rebels and kills the man who has subjugated it. I should also I shall be able to, but I must know him, touch him, see him. Learned men say that eyes of animals, as they differ from ours, do not distinguish as ours do. And my eye cannot distinguish this newcomer who is oppressing me. Why? Oh, now I remember the words of the monk at Mont Saint-Michel. Can we see the 100,000th part of what exists? Listen, there is the wind, which is the strongest force in nature. It knocks men down, blows down buildings, uproots trees, raises the sea into mountains of water, destroys cliffs, and casts great ships onto the breakers. It kills, it whistles, it sighs, it roars. Have you ever seen it? And can you see it? It exists for all that, however. And I went on thinking, my eyes are so weak, so imperfect, that they do not even distinguish hard bodies if they are as transparent as glass. If a glass without quicksilver behind it were to bar my way, I should run into it, just like a bird which has flown into a room, breaks its head against the window panes. 1,000 things, moreover, deceive a man and lead him astray. How then is it surprising that he cannot perceive a new body which is penetrated and pervaded by the light? A new being? Why not? It was assuredly bound to come. Why should we be the last? We do not distinguish it, like all the others created before us. The reason is that its nature is more delicate, its body finer and more finished than ours. Our makeup is so weak, so awkwardly conceived. Our body is encumbered with groans that are always tired, always being strained like locks that are too complicated. It lives like a plant and like an animal nourishing itself with difficulty on air, herbs and flesh. It is a brute machine which is a prey to maladies, to malformations, to decay. It is a broken-winded, badly regulated, simple and eccentric, ingeniously yet badly made, a coarse and yet a delicate mechanism. In brief, the outline of a being which might become intelligent and great There are only a few, so few, stages of development in this world, from the oyster up to man. Why should there not be one more, when once that period is accomplished, which separates the successive products one from the other? Why not one more? Why not, also, other trees with immense splendid flowers, perfuming whole regions? Why not other elements besides fire, air, earth, and water? There are 4, only 4. Nursing fathers of various beings. What a pity! Why should not there be 40, 400, 4,000? How poor everything is, how mean and wretched, grudgingly given, poorly invented, clumsily made. Ah, the elephant and the hippopotamus, what power! And the camel, what suppleness! But the butterfly, you will say, a flying flower. I dream of one that should be as large as 100 worlds, with wings whose shape, beauty, colours, and motion I cannot even express. But I see it. It flutters from star to star, refreshing them and perfuming them with the light and harmonious breath of its flight. And the people up there gaze at it as it passes in an ecstasy of delight. What is the matter with me? It is he, the Horla, who haunts me, and who makes me think of these foolish things. He is within me. He is becoming my soul. I shall kill him. August 20th. I shall kill him. I have seen him. Yesterday I sat down at my table and pretended to write very assiduously. I knew quite well that he would come prowling round me, quite close to me, so close that I might perhaps be able to touch him, to seize him, and then I should have the strength of desperation. I should have my hands, my knees, my chest, my forehead, my teeth to strangle him, to crush him, to bite him, to tear him to pieces. And I watched for him with all my overexcited nerves. I had lighted my 2 lamps and the 8 wax candles on my mantelpiece, as if by this light I should discover him. My bed, my old oak bed with its columns, was opposite to me. On my right was the fireplace, on my left the door, which was carefully closed. After I had left it open for some time in order to attract him, behind me was a very high wardrobe with a looking-glass in it, which served me to dress by every day, and in which I was in the habit of inspecting myself from head to foot every time I passed it. So I pretended to be writing, in order to deceive him, for he also was watching me. And suddenly I was certain, that he was reading over my shoulder, that he was there, almost touching my ear. I got up so quickly, with my hands extended, that I almost fell. Horror! It was as bright as at midday, but I did not see myself in the glass. It was empty, clear, profound, full of light, but my figure was not reflected in it, and I was opposite to it. I saw the large, clear glass from top to bottom, and I looked at it with unsteady eyes. I did not dare advance. I did not venture to make a movement, feeling certain, nevertheless, that he was there, but that he would escape me again, he whose imperceptible body had absorbed my reflection. How frightened I was! And then suddenly I began to see myself through a mist in the depths of the looking-glass, in a mist, as it were, or through a veil of water, and it seemed to me as if this water were flowing slowly from left to right, and making my figure clearer every moment. It was like the end of an eclipse. Whatever hid me did not appear to possess clearly defined outlines, but was a sort of opaque transparency, which gradually grew clearer. At last I was able to distinguish myself completely, as I do every day when I look at myself. I had seen him, and the horror of it remained with me, and makes me shudder even now. August 21st. How could I kill him, since I could not get hold of him? Poison? But he would see me mix it with the water. And then, would our poisons have any effect on his impalpable body? No doubt about the matter. Then, August 22nd. I sent for a blacksmith from Rouen and ordered iron shutters of him for my room, such as some private hotels in Paris have on the ground floor, for fear of thieves, and he is going to make me a similar door as well. I have made myself out a coward, but I do not care about that. September 10th. Rouen, Hôtel Continental. It is done. But is he dead? My mind is thoroughly upset by what I have seen. Well, then, yesterday, the locksmith having put on the iron shutters and door, I left everything open until midnight, although it was getting cold. Suddenly I felt that he was there, and mad joy took possession of me. I got up softly and I walked to the right and left for some time, so that he might not guess anything. Then I took off my boots and put on my slippers carelessly. Then I fastened the iron shutters, and going back to the door quickly, I double-locked it with a padlock, putting the key into my pocket. Suddenly, I noticed that he was moving restlessly around me, that in his turn he was frightened and was ordering me to let him out. I nearly yielded, though I did not quite, but putting my back to the door I half opened it, just enough to allow me to go out backward, and as I am very tall, my head touched the lintel. I was sure that he had not been able to escape, and I shut him up quite alone. What happiness! I had him fast. Then I ran downstairs into the drawing-room, which was under my bedroom. I took the 2 lamps and poured all the oil onto the carpet, the furniture, everywhere. Then I set fire to it and made my escape, after having carefully double-locked the door. I went and hid myself at the bottom of the garden, in a clump of laurel bushes. How long it was! Everything was dark, silent, motionless, not a breath of fresh air and not a star, but heavy banks of clouds, which one could not see, but which weighed, oh, so heavily on my soul. I looked at my house and waited. How long it was! I already began to think that the fire had gone out of its own accord, or that he had extinguished it, when one of the lower windows gave way under the violence of the flames, and a long, soft, caressing sheet of red flame mounted up the white wall and kissed it as high as the roof. The light fell onto the trees, the branches, and the leaves, and a shiver of fear pervaded them also. The birds awoke. A dog began to howl, and it seemed to me as if the day were breaking. Almost immediately, 2 other windows flew into fragments, and I saw that the whole of the lower part of my house was nothing but a terrible furnace. But a cry, a horrible, shrill, heart-rending cry, a woman's cry, sounded through the night, and 2 garret windows were opened. I had forgotten the servants. I saw the terror-struck faces and the frantic waving of their arms. Then, overwhelmed with horror, I ran off to the village shouting, "Help! Help! Fire! Fire!" Meeting some people who were already coming to the scene, I went back with them to see. By this time the house was nothing but a horrible and magnificent funeral pile, a monstrous pyre which lit up the whole country, a pyre where men were burning and where he was burning also. He, my prisoner, that new being, the new master, the Horla. Suddenly, the whole roof fell in between the walls, and a volcano of flames darted up to the sky. Through all the windows which opened onto that furnace, I saw the flames darting, and I reflected that he was there, in that kiln, dead. Dead? Perhaps. His body? Was not his body, which was transparent, indestructible by such means as would kill ours? If he were not dead, Perhaps time alone has power over that invisible and redoubtable being. Why, this transparent, unrecognizable body, this body belonging to a spirit, if it had also to fear ills, infirmities, and premature destruction. Premature destruction? All human terror springs from that. After man, the Horla. After him who can die every day, at any hour, at any moment, by any accident, he came. He was only to die at his own proper hour and minute, because he had touched the limits of his existence. No, there is no doubt about it. He is not dead. Then, I suppose I must kill myself. This has been The Horla, written by Guy de Maupassant, narrated for you by Jonathan Dunne. Original year of publication 1887. This work is in the public domain. Production and narration copyright 2025. Jonathan Dunne. The Oblong Box, written by Edgar Allan Poe, narrated for you by Jonathan Dunne. Original year of publication 1844. This work is in the public domain. Production and narration copyright 2025. Jonathan Dunne. Some years ago, I engaged passage from Charleston, SC, to the city of New York, in the fine packet ship Independence, Captain Hardy. We were to sail on the 15th of the month, June, weather permitting, and on the 14th I went on board to arrange some matters in my state-room. I found that we were to have a great many passengers, including a more than usual number of ladies. On the list were several of my acquaintances, and among other names I was rejoiced to see that Mr. Cornelius Wyatt, a young artist for whom I entertained feelings of warm friendship. He had been with me a fellow student at C. University, where we were very much together. We had the ordinary temperament of genius, and was a compound of misanthropy, sensibility, and enthusiasm. To these qualities he united the warmest and truest heart which ever beat in a human bosom. I observed that his name was corded upon 3 state-rooms, and upon again referring to the list of passengers, I found that he had engaged passage for himself, wife, and 2 sisters, his own. The state-rooms were sufficiently roomy, and each had 2 berths, one above the other. These berths, to be sure, were so exceedingly narrow as to be insufficient for more than one person. Still, I could not comprehend why there were 3 state-rooms for these 4 persons. I was, just at that epoch, in one of those moody frames of mind which make a man abnormally inquisitive about trifles, and I confess with shame that I busied myself in a variety of ill-bred and preposterous conjectures about this matter of the supernumerary state-room. It was no business of mine, to be sure, but with none the less pertinacity did I occupy myself in attempts to resolve the enigma. At last I reached a conclusion which wrought in me great wonder, why I had not arrived at it before. "It is a servant, of course," I said. "What a fool I am, not sooner to have thought of so obvious a solution." And then I again repaired to the list. But here I saw distinctly that no servant was to come with the party, although in fact it had been the original design to bring one, for the words "and servant" had been first written and then overscored. Oh, extra baggage to be sure, I now said to myself. Something he wishes not to be put in the hold, something to be kept under his own eye. Ah, I have it, a painting or so, and this is what he has been bargaining about with Niccolò, the Italian Jew. This idea satisfied me, and I dismissed my curiosity for the nonce. Wyatt's two sisters I knew very well, and most amiable and clever girls they were. His wife he had newly married, and I had never yet seen her. He had often talked about her in my presence, however, and in his usual style of enthusiasm. He described her as of surpassing beauty, wit, and accomplishment. I was, therefore, quite anxious to make her acquaintance. On the day in which I visited the ship, the 14th, Wyatt and party were also to visit it, so the captain informed me, and I waited on board an hour longer than I had designed, in hope of being presented to the bride. But then an apology came. Mrs. W. was a little indisposed and would decline coming on board until tomorrow, at the hour of sailing. The morrow having arrived, I was going from my hotel to the wharf, when Captain Hardy met me and said that, owing to circumstances, a stupid but convenient phrase, he rather thought the Independence would not sail for a day or two, and that when all was ready he would send up and let me know. This I thought strange, for there was a stiff southerly breeze, but as these circumstances were not forthcoming, although I pumped for them with much perseverance, I had nothing to do but to return home and digest my impatience at leisure. I did not receive the expected message from the captain for nearly a week. It came at length, however, and I immediately went on board. The ship was crowded with passengers, and everything was in the bustle attendant upon making sail. Wyatt's party arrived in about 10 minutes after myself. There were the two sisters, the bride, and the artist, the latter in one of his customary fits of moody misanthropy. I was too well used to these, however, to pay them any special attention. He did not even introduce me to his wife, this courtesy devolving perforce upon his sister Marian, a very sweet and intelligent girl who, in a few hurried words, made us acquainted. Mrs. Wyatt had been closely veiled, and when she raised her veil, in acknowledging my bow, I confess that I was very proudly astonished. I should have been much more so, however, had not long experience advised me not to trust with too implicit a reliance the enthusiastic descriptions of my friend, the artist, when indulging in comments upon the loveliness of woman. When beauty was the theme, I well knew with that facility he soared into the regions of the purely ideal. The truth is, I could not help regarding Mrs. White as a decidedly plain-looking woman. If not positively ugly, she was not, I think, very far from it. She was dressed, however, in exquisite taste, and then I had no doubt that she had captivated my friend's heart by the more enduring graces of the intellect and soul. She said very few words, and passed at once into her state-room with Mr. W. My old inquisitiveness now returned. There was no servant. That was a settled point. I looked, therefore, for the extra baggage. After some delay, a cart arrived at the wharf, with an oblong pine box, which was everything that seemed to be expected. Immediately upon its arrival we made sail, and in a short time were safely over the bar and standing out to sea. The box in question was, as I say, oblong. It was about 6 feet in length by 2.5 in breadth. I observed it attentively, and liked to be precise. Now this shape was peculiar, and no sooner had I seen it than I took credit to myself for the accuracy of my guessing. I had reached the conclusion. It will be remembered that the extra baggage of my friend the artist would prove to be pictures, or at least a picture, for I knew he had been for several weeks in conference with Niccolò. And now here was a box, which from its shape could possibly contain nothing in the world but a copy of Leonardo's Last Supper, and a copy of this very Last Supper done by Rubini, the younger, at Florence. I had known for some time to be in the possession of Niccolò. This point, therefore, I considered as sufficiently settled. I chuckled excessively when I thought of my acumen. It was the first time I had ever known Wyatt to keep from me any of his artistical secrets. but here he evidently intended to steal a march upon me and smuggle a fine picture to New York, under my very nose, expecting me to know nothing of the matter. I resolved to quiz him well, now and hereafter. One thing, however, annoyed me not a little. The box did not go into the extra state-room. It was deposited in Wyatt's own, and there too it remained, occupying very nearly the whole of the floor, no doubt to the exceeding discomfort of the artist and his wife, this the more especially at the tar or paint with which it was lettered in sprawling capitals, emitted a strong, disagreeable, and, to my fancy, a peculiarly disgusting odour. On the lid were painted the words, Mrs. Adelaide Curtis, Albany, New York, charge of Cornelius Wyatt, Esquire, this side up, to be handled with care. Now I was aware that Mrs. Adelaide Curtis of Albany was the artist's wife's mother, but then I looked upon the whole address as a mystification intended especially for myself. I made up my mind, of course, that the box and contents would never get farther north than the studio of my misanthropic friend in Chambers Street, New York. For the first 3 or 4 days we had fine weather, although the wind was dead ahead, having chopped round to the northward immediately upon our losing sight of the coast. The passengers were, consequently, in high spirits and disposed to be social. I must except, however, Wyatt and his sisters, who behaved stiffly, and I could not help thinking uncourteously, to the rest of the party. Wyatt's conduct I did not so much regard. He was gloomy, even beyond his usual habit. In fact, he was morose. But in him I was prepared for eccentricity. For the sisters, however, I could make no excuse. They secluded themselves in their state-rooms during the greater part of the passage, and absolutely refused, although I repeatedly urged them, to hold communication with any person on board. Mrs. Wyatt herself was far more agreeable. That is to say, she was chatty, and to be chatty is no slight recommendation at sea. She became excessively intimate with most of the ladies, and, to my profound astonishment, evinced no equivocal disposition to coquet with the men. She amused us all very much. I say amused, and scarcely know how to explain myself. The truth is, I soon found that Mrs. W. was far oftener laughed at than with. The gentlemen said little about her, but the ladies in a little while pronounced her a good-hearted thing, rather indifferent-looking, totally uneducated, and decidedly vulgar. The great wonder was how Wyatt had been entrapped into such a match. Wealth was the general solution, but this I know to be no solution at all, for Wyatt had told me that she neither brought him $1 nor had any expectations from any source whatever. He had married, he said, for love and for love only, and his bride was far more than worthy of his love. When I thought of these expressions on the part of my friend, I confess that intellectual, so fastidious, with so exquisite a perception of the faulty, and so keen an appreciation of the beautiful, to be sure, the lady seemed especially fond of him, particularly so in his absence, when she made herself ridiculous by frequent quotations of what had been said by her beloved husband, Mr. Wyatt. The word husband seemed forever, to use one of her own delicate expressions, forever on the tip of her tongue. In the meantime, it was observed by all on board that he avoided her in the most pointed manner, and, for the most part, shut himself up alone in his state-room, where, in fact, he might have been said to live altogether, leaving his wife at full liberty to amuse herself as she thought best, in the public society of the main cabin. My conclusion, from what I saw and heard, was that the artist, by some unaccountable freak of fate, or perhaps in some fit of enthusiastic and fanciful passion, had been induced to unite himself with a person altogether beneath him, and that the natural result, entire and speedy disgust, had ensued. I pitied him from the bottom of my heart, but could not, for that reason, quite forgive his incommunicativeness in the matter of the Last Supper. For this I resolved to have my revenge. One day he came upon deck, and taking his arm as had been my wont, I sauntered with him backward and forward. His gloom, however, which I considered quite natural under the circumstances, seemed entirely unabated. He said little, and that moodily and with evident effort. I ventured a jest or two, and he made a sickening attempt at a smile. Poor fellow! As I thought of his wife, I wondered that he could have heart to put on even the semblance of mirth. I determined to commence a series of covert insinuations or innuendos about the oblong box, just to let him perceive gradually that I was not altogether the butt or victim of his little bit of pleasant mystification. My first observation was by way of opening a masked battery. I said something about the peculiar shape of that box, and as I spoke the words I smiled knowingly, winked, and touched him gently with my forefinger in the ribs. The manner in which Wyatt received this harmless pleasantry convinced me at once that he was mad. At first he stared at me as if he found it impossible to comprehend the witticism of my remark, but as its point seemed slowly to make its way into his brain, his eyes, in the same proportion, seemed protruding from their sockets. Then he grew very red, then hideously pale. Then, as if highly amused with what I had insinuated, he began a loud and boisterous laugh, which, to my astonishment, he kept up with gradually increasing vigour for 10 minutes or more. In conclusion, he fell flat and heavily upon the deck. When I ran to uplift him, to all appearance, he was dead. I called assistance, and with much difficulty we brought him to himself. Upon reviving, he spoke incoherently for some time. At length we bled him and put him to bed. The next morning he was quite recovered, so far as regarded his mere bodily health. Of his mind I say nothing, of course. I avoided him during the rest of the passage, by advice of the captain, who seemed to coincide with me altogether in my views of his insanity, but cautioned me to say nothing on this head to any person on board. Several circumstances occurred immediately after this fit of Wyatt, which contributed to heighten the curiosity with which I was already possessed. Among other things, this. I had been nervous, drank too much strong green tea, and slept ill at night. In fact, for 2 nights I could not be properly said to sleep at all. Now my state-room opened into the main cabin, or dining-room, as did those of all the single men on board. Wyatt's 3 rooms were in the after cabin, which was separated from the main one by a slight sliding door, never locked, even at night. As we were almost constantly on a wind, and the breeze was not a little stiff, the ship heeled to leeward very considerably, and whenever her starboard side was to leeward, the sliding door between the cabins slid open, and so remained, nobody taking the trouble to get up and shut it. But my berth was in such a position that when my own state-room door was open, as well as the sliding door in question, and my own door was always open on account of the heat, I could see into the after cabin quite distinctly, and just at that portion of it too, where were situated the state-rooms of Mr. Wyatt. Well, during 2 nights, not consecutive, while I lay awake, I clearly saw Mrs. W., about 11 o'clock upon each night, steal cautiously from the state-room of Mr. W. and enter the extra room, where she remained until daybreak, when she was called by her husband and went back. That they were virtually separated was clear. They had separate apartments, no doubt in contemplation of a more permanent divorce. And here, after all, I thought was the mystery of the extra state-room. There was another circumstance, too, which interested me much. During the 2 wakeful nights in question, and immediately after the disappearance of Mrs. Wyatt into the extra state-room, I was attracted by certain singular, cautious, subdued noises in that of her husband. After listening to them for some time with thoughtful attention, I at length succeeded perfectly in translating their import. They were sounds occasioned by the artist in prying open the oblong box by means of a chisel and mallet, the latter being apparently muffled or deadened by some soft woolen or cotton substance in which its head was enveloped. In this manner I fancied I could distinguish the precise moment when he fairly disengaged the lid, Also, that I could determine when he removed it altogether, and when he deposited it upon the lower berth in his room. This latter point I knew, for example, by certain slight taps which the lid made in striking against the wooden edges of the berth, as he endeavoured to lay it down very gently, that being no room for it on the floor. After this there was a dead stillness, and I heard nothing more upon either occasion until nearly daybreak, unless perhaps I may mention a low sobbing or murmuring sound, so very much suppressed as to be nearly inaudible, if indeed the whole of this latter noise were not rather produced by my own imagination. I say it seemed to resemble sobbing or sighing, but of course it could not have been either. I'd rather think it was a ringing in my own ears. Mr. Wyatt, no doubt, according to custom, was merely giving the rein to one of his hobbies, indulging in one of his fits of artistic enthusiasm. He had opened his oblong box in order to feast his eyes on the pictorial treasure within. There was nothing in this, however, to make him sob. I repeat, therefore, that it might have been simply a freak of my own fancy, distempered by good Captain Hardy's green tea. Just before dawn, on each of the 2 nights of which I speak, I distinctly heard Mr. Wyatt replace the lid upon the oblong box, and force the nails into their old places by means of the muffled mallet. Having done this, he issued from his state-room, fully dressed, and proceeded to call Mrs. W. from hers. We had been at sea 7 days, and were now off Cape Hatteras, when there came a tremendously heavy blow from the southwest. We were, in a measure, prepared for it, however, as the wind had been holding out threats for some time. Everything was made snug, alow and aloft, and as the wind steadily freshened, we lay to at length, under spanker and fore topsail, both double reefed. In this trim we rode safely enough for 48 hours, the ship proving herself an excellent sea-boat in many respects, and shipping no water of any consequence. At the end of this period, however, the gale had freshened into a hurricane, and our aftersail split into ribbons, bringing us so much in the trough of the water, that we shipped several prodigious seas, one immediately after the other. By this accident we lost 3 men overboard with the caboose, and nearly the whole of the larboard bulwarks. Scarcely had we recovered our senses before the fore topsail went into shreds. Even we got up a storm staysail, and with this did pretty well for some hours, the ship heading the sea much more steadily than before. The gale still held on, however, and we saw no sign of its abating. The rigging was found to be ill-fitted and greatly strained, and on the 3rd day of the blow, about 5 in the afternoon, our mizzenmast, in a heavy lurch to windward, went by the board. For an hour or more we tried in vain to get rid of it, on account of the prodigious rolling of the ship, and, before we had succeeded, the carpenter came aft and announced 4 feet of water in the hold. To add to our dilemma, we found the pumps choked and nearly useless. All was now confusion and despair, but an effort was made to lighten the ship by throwing overboard as much of her cargo as could be reached, and by cutting away the 2 masts that remained. This we at last accomplished, but we were still unable to do anything at the pumps, and in the meantime the leak gained on us very fast. At sundown, the gale had sensibly diminished in violence, and as the sea went down with it, we still entertained faint hopes of saving ourselves in the boats. At 8 p.m. the clouds broke away to windward, and we had the advantage of a full moon, a piece of good fortune which served wonderfully to cheer our drooping spirits. After incredible labour we succeeded at length in getting the longboat over the side without material accident, and into this we crowded the whole of the crew and most of the passengers. This party made off immediately, and after undergoing much suffering finally arrived in safety at Ocracoke Inlet on the 3rd day after the wreck. 14 passengers with the captain remained on board, resolving to trust their fortunes to the jolly boat at the stern. We lowered it without difficulty, although it was only by a miracle that we prevented it from swamping as it touched the water. It contained, when afloat, the captain and his wife, Mr. Wyatt and party, a Mexican officer, wife, 4 children, and myself with a Negro valet. We had no room, of course, for anything, except a few positively necessary instruments, some provisions, and the clothes upon our backs. No one had thought of even attempting to save anything more. What must have been the astonishment of all, then, when, having proceeded a few fathoms from the ship, Mr. Wyatt stood up in the stern sheets and coolly demanded of Captain Hardy that the boat should be put back for the purposes of taking in his oblong box. "Sit down, Mr. Wyatt," replied the captain, somewhat sternly. "You will capsize us if you do not sit quite still. Our gunwale is almost in the water now." "The box!" vociferated Mr. Wyatt, still standing. "The box, I say! Captain Hardy, you will not refuse me. Its weight will be but a trifle. It is nothing, mere nothing. By the mother who bore you, for the love of heaven, by your hope of salvation, I implore you to put back for the box." The captain, for a moment, seemed touched by the earnest appeal of the artist, but he regained his stern composure and merely said, "Mr. Wyatt, you are mad. I cannot listen to you. Sit down, I say, or you will swamp the boat. Stay, hold him, seize him. He is about to spring overboard. There, I knew it. He is over." As the captain said this, Mr. Wyatt in fact sprang from the boat, and as we were yet in the lee of the wreck, succeeded by almost superhuman exertion in getting hold of a rope which hung from the forechains. In another moment he was on board and rushing frantically down into the cabin. In the meantime, we had been swept astern of the ship, and being quite out of her lee, were at the mercy of the tremendous sea which was still running. We made a determined effort to put back, but our little boat was like a feather in the breath of the tempest. We saw at a glance that the doom of the unfortunate artist was sealed. As our distance from the wreck rapidly increased, the madman, for as such only could we regard him, was seen to emerge from the companion, way up which by dint of strength that appeared gigantic, he dragged, bodily, the oblong box. While we gazed in the extremity of astonishment, he passed rapidly several turns of a 3-inch rope, first around the box and then around his body. In another instant both body and box were in the sea, disappearing suddenly, at once, and forever. We lingered a while sadly upon our oars, with our eyes riveted upon the spot. At length we pulled away. The silence remained unbroken for an hour. Finally, I hazarded a remark. "Did you observe, Captain, how suddenly they sank? Was that not an exceedingly singular thing? I confess that I entertained some feeble hope of his final deliverance when I saw him lash himself to the box and commit himself to the sea." "They sank as matter of course," replied the captain, "and that like a shot. They will soon rise again, however, but not till the salt melts." "The salt?" I ejaculated. "Hush!" said the captain, pointing to the wife and sisters of the deceased. "We must talk of these things at some more appropriate time." We suffered much and made a narrow escape, but fortune befriended us as well as our mates in the longboat. We landed, in fine, more dead than alive, after 4 days of intense distress, upon the beach opposite Roanoke Island. We remained here a week, were not ill-treated by the wreckers, and at length obtained a passage to New York. About a month after the loss of the Independence, I happened to meet Captain Hardy in Broadway. Our conversation turned naturally upon the disaster, and especially the sad fate of poor Wyatt. I thus learned the following particulars. The artist had engaged passage for himself, wife, 2 sisters, and a servant. His wife was indeed, as she had been represented, a most lovely and most accomplished woman. On the morning of the 14th of June, the day in which I first visited the ship, the lady suddenly sickened and died. The young husband was frantic with grief, but circumstances imperatively forbade the deferring his voyage to New York. It was necessary to take her to her mother, the corpse of his adored wife, and, on the other hand, the universal prejudice which would prevent his doing so openly was well known. 9/10 of the passengers would have abandoned the ship rather than take passage with a dead body. In this dilemma, Captain Hardy arranged that the corpse, being first partially embalmed and packed with a large quantity of salt in a box of suitable dimensions, should be conveyed on board as merchandise. Nothing was to be said of the lady's decease, and as it was well understood that Mr. Wyatt had engaged passage for his wife, it became necessary that some person should personate her during the voyage. This the deceased lady's maid was easily prevailed on to do. The extra state-room, originally engaged for this girl during her mistress's life, was now merely retained. In this state-room the pseudo-wife slept, of course, every night. In the daytime she performed to the best of her ability the part of her mistress, whose person, it had been carefully ascertained, was unknown to any of the passengers on board. My own mistake arose, naturally enough, though too careless, too inquisitive, and too impulsive a temperament. But of late it is a rare thing that I sleep soundly at night. There is a countenance which haunts me, turn as I will. There is an hysterical laugh which will forever ring within my ears. This has been The Oblong Box, written by Edgar Allan Poe, narrated for you by Jonathan Dunne. Original year of publication 1844. This work is in the public domain. Production and narration copyright 2025. Jonathan Dunne. Welcome to Timeless Terrors Volume 7, a collection of classic tales where reason falters and the unseen presses close. In these pages, obsession sharpens into madness, grief wears a mask, and strange realms linger beyond comprehension. From Guy de Maupassant, the Horla charts a descent into paranoia and possession, where an invisible presence slowly takes control. Edgar Allan Poe's The Oblong Box carries you across dark waters where secrecy, loss, and horror travel together toward an unthinkable revelation. And from Ambrose Bierce, an inhabitant of Carcosa, a haunting meditation on death and memory, where the boundary between the living and the dead dissolves into eerie stillness. Narrated by Amazon best-selling horror author Jonathan Dunne. Before we begin, a brief personal note. I'll be stepping back slightly from this channel to concentrate on my next horror novel, Mummy, a story about a strange young man who lives in a mortuary and takes embalming one step too far. I'll continue uploading public domain stories and my own horror works, but at a slower pace, returning to 2 or 3 uploads a week rather than 5 or 6. Your support means more than I can say.